Okay, let's get into an area in Adobe Illustrator that I think we need to start with before you do anything, and that's preferences. Now, to some people, preferences are boring, but not people who know the power of preferences. There are two ways to get to them from the pull-down menu. If you're running Windows, go to the word Edit on the pull-down menu, and down here you'll see Preferences. On Macs, for whatever reason, they're under the word Illustrator, and there they are. Click General. Now you can also press Command K, which will take you right into the General Preferences. Now we're not going to go over all of them, but we're going to look at a couple that I think are kind of interesting. Number one in General, which are, well, general preferences. You have Keyboard Increment. To me, this is an important one because when you select an object in Adobe Illustrator and begin moving it with your arrow keys, that's how much it moves it. You can change that number to fit your needs. Now, I would suggest if you're new to the program and you've never ever changed that, 1 point is probably pretty good for now. But you might, after a while, decide you want a more precise or slower or faster type of keyboard increment. Go ahead and check that one out. You have a constrain angle right here, which is set to 0 right now, and that's the constraining of an object when you rotate it. You can change that preference. You have a corner radius. This is for like rounded rectangles. That's the default you get. If you're always doing them, say at, I don't know, 20 points, then you can change that. It makes it easier for you. A couple of the other things down here, like use precise cursors. Now let me get out of here for a second and pick up one of these tools, like maybe the lasso tool. If I come over here, you see the lasso. You say, all right, but when you're drawing with it, where is it drawing from? I mean, is it the bottom of the lasso? Because that's how Photoshop does it. Is it at the top at the arrow? Where does it start the drawing from? If I go back into Preferences and I turn that on, let's go ahead and look again. As you can see, it's a precise cursor, and obviously it starts at the very center of those crosshairs. That's up to you. Let's go ahead and go back into Illustrator Preferences, into General. I'm going to turn that one off only because it's defaulted as being off. We'll change these things as we go along, and you should look at them to decide what's best for you. Now, Tooltips is something I typically turn off. Tooltips are when you hover over a button or over a panel. It describes what's going on. If you're not too comfortable with the program yet, that's actually not a bad thing to have on because it tells you what they are. If you do know the program pretty well, they can kind of get in the way sometimes. Over here is one of my favorite ones, Scale, Strokes, and Effects. Now what that does is when you're creating designs in this program, strokes and effects, you have a 2-point stroke and you make the item twice as big. Well, if that's not on, the stroke stays at 2 points. That's a really nice one to have on. I'd recommend you turn that one on because in most cases, when you change something, you want everything to change with it proportionately. Now let's skip around a little. We're not going to go through all of them in this one lesson. We will go through other ones as time goes on through the lesson series. Go down to Type. In Type, there's a couple of things I want to mention here. We're going to get into more detail in Type when we get into typing in the program. But you've got options like leading, tracking, and baseline shift in terms of the defaults that are being used. And if you, as a quote-unquote typesetter, like different options here, every time you open up a document, this is where you would change them. The two I want to show you here, though, one is brand new. Number of recent fonts. I love this option. What it gives me the ability to see, if I leave it at 5, are the last 5 fonts that I have used. Now, anybody that's used Illustrator has been frustrated with the fact that every time you do a new text box, it goes back to the default font. And if you want a font, even though you've just used it, you've got to go back alphabetically through your list. That's frustrating. The other one is Font Preview. Now, I've got it at medium. Actually, that's the default. What that does is it lets you see exactly what the font is going to look like. Now, if you're like me, you got a lot of fonts. You might not know every single font and what it looks like. And sometimes you're just looking for that certain je ne sais quoi kind of, I don't know what it is, but I like it kind of moment. And you can actually see the fonts. Now, small is way too small for my eyes. Medium or large, either one, choose it. If you turn that off, you just get the fonts typed out in standard text. Let's do one more area, and that would be the user interface. In the user interface, you have a brand new feature For 25 years, Adobe and Aldus have given us the exact basic same type of background for us to look at. All this stuff here, the interface itself. And they changed that in CS6 in all the programs. The default is medium dark. If I click this button, I can go into light. Bright, isn't it? That's kind of classic. And come back down here, I can go to dark. You say, well, Andy, I like these, but I don't like any one of them. You can go to the slider right here and do whatever you want. Now, the default is medium dark, so let's go ahead and put it back at medium dark. This one down here is canvas color match user interface, or white. This is the canvas right over here. We can make that white, or we can make that a match. I prefer match, so I'm going to leave that alone. Auto collapse iconic panels. That's what these are over here. If you turn that on, every time you reopen Illustrator, those things are going to be collapsed down. I would rather Illustrator leave my choices alone, so I leave that one off, and I really recommend you leave this one on, because that leaves all of your documents as tabs up here, as opposed to floating little panels all over the place. Now let's go ahead and click OK. Those, to me, are not obviously the only preferences, but those are the ones that you really want to set up right up front so you can get started working. And that's what we're about to do. So, on to the next.